Hi, I'm Ted Haptagaber, founder and producer of Live Talks Los Angeles. Thanks for joining us. Since we started over a decade ago, we have brought you hundreds of conversations with storytellers, writers, actors, musicians, humorists, chefs, and thought leaders in business and science. You can watch and hear most of these in our YouTube channel and our podcast. For details, visit livetalksla.org. And now, here's the show you've tuned in to see.
We welcome Emmanuel Acho and Justin Baldoni to Live Talks Los Angeles. They'll discuss Emmanuel's book, Illogical, Saying Yes to a Life Without Limits. Emmanuel is a former NFL star and New York Times bestselling author of Uncomfortable Conversations with a Black Man, followed by Uncomfortable Conversations with a Black Boy. He won a Primetime Emmy for his online series, Uncomfortable Conversations with a Black Man. Justin is a director, producer, actor, author, and the co-founder of Wayfarer Studios and the Wayfarer Foundation. He is known for creating purpose-driven media that impacts social change. His credits include Clouds, 5 Feet, My Last Days, and Jane the Virgin. Inspired by his personal journey, he created Man Enough, a conversation series that explores the messages of masculinity while reimagining what it means to be a man in the world today. Welcome to all attending, and thanks in advance for those of you who sent in questions. I'll let you take it from here, Justin.
So honored to be here with you. It's really funny for me to be here with you, considering I was the one that originally reached out to you after being so taken aback and blown away by your bravery and your illogicalness. Can we use that?
Is that a word?
Is that a word? I don't think it's a word, but I feel like it could be now. And I'm so happy to be here promoting your new book, Illogical, which is so beautiful. I've been listening to it and making mental notes, writing stuff down. It's coming into my life at a really great time to remind me to be illogical. And I'm just really grateful that you wanted me to be here with you to promote this really beautiful gift, I think, that you're giving the world.
And well, one, thanks for joining me, and two, something about our conversations that lead to authenticity, vulnerability, transparency. And we were saying off camera, but again, congratulations, your podcast, a couple different award nominations. And I know our episode ended up being nominated, and it was weird because when we were talking, I told you I felt less than. And you all will see over the course of this conversation, Justin and I get transparent, we get real, we get raw, we get authentic. But brother, it's good to be with you, man.
It's so good to be with you. Okay. Before I get into all the questions, because I have a bunch of questions for you. Real, right? Because this book is real. It's honest. You a lot of times say, like, I'm going to be honest with you. And as a fellow author, when we do that, we are being very honest. So how are you feeling right now? Because you've had 2 best-selling books, right? And you talk about in this book how even when you release Uncomfortable Conversations with the Black Man, after that first episode, you're like, oh wait, the logical thing would be almost to not release another one because I didn't want to be. But then I'm like, no, I can't. I got to do more. This is my calling. So you've now released 2 best-selling books. Are you feeling any pressure? How are you feeling? What are you, or are you like the kid at the blackjack table right now? You're just like, nah, I got it.
For those that don't realize, Justin is alluding to the intro to Illogical, where I talk about being at a blackjack table and there's a character named the Kid. Phenomenal story. Of course, there's pressure, man. Like the interesting thing about this book, it was my first book. Yeah, Uncomfortable Conversations with the Black Boy Over My Left Shoulder was a #1 bestseller, and Uncomfortable with the Black Man debuted at #3. But Illogical was my first book, and I say that, Justin, for this reason. I started writing Illogical before I ever started writing Uncomfortable Conversations with a Black Man. The entire book deck, if you will. I forget what they're called. Remind me as you remember. What you have to create in order to take a book out and try to sell it. A 35-page book proposal.
Yeah.
The book proposal, bro, it was written before Uncomfortable Conversations with a Black Man, but then our world ran into utter chaos and turmoil. I always say Illogical was my destination. Uncomfortable Conversations was my detour. And so it's a lot of pressure because people have these preconceived expectations of me as an author, not realizing Illogical is my heart. It's my truest being. It is, if you were to cut my heart open and put it out on pen and paper, Illogical would come out. Yeah. Uncomfortable was me speaking to a moment, but Illogical is like me speaking to my life.
I love that. And it's so interesting because so much of this book also couldn't have been written before Uncomfortable Conversations, right? So it's like you wrote it, but also you needed it in order to really complete the book, right?
Here's what's crazy. Craziest thing about Illogical, which is this is actually the first time I'm sharing this, which is why I'm glad you asked. And truly, it's the first time I'm sharing it. I wrote Illogical, like I told y'all. I finished the book proposal. You can go back on my Twitter on, I believe it was 4/4/20, April 4th, 2020. I said, time to write a book, fingers crossed, because it was COVID. So middle of COVID, I was like, yo, let's put pen to paper. After writing Illogical, after writing the entirety of the book proposal, I had to go back through every chapter and cross-check it with Uncomfortable Conversations because, Justin, Uncomfortable Conversations is illogical. Sitting in a chair in an all-white room, talking to a camera with nobody else around, thinking that you can change the world, that goes against conventional wisdom. And illogical is simply something and someone who's going against conventional wisdom. That's being illogical. So I go through every chapter of Illogical after Uncomfortable Conversations is done. And I'm like, wait, I had to have childlike faith. I had to put on my earmuffs.
Yeah.
I had to keep on dreaming. I did have a moment where I said, I might be crazy. I burst a blood vessel in my vocal cord, so I couldn't speak for a week. I did have that scar tissue moment. So I said, if illogical is real and if illogical is true, it should be able to line up with Uncomfortable Conversations. And it blew my mind when it did.
I love it. I mean, you say in the book, things happen the way they're supposed to. So there's no bad. It's so funny. I have all these questions, but having read or listened to the book, and by the way, to anybody who is watching this, I highly suggest you consider both buying the book and also listening to it, because Emmanuel does a beautiful job of narrating his own book. And I can tell you firsthand, it's a very hard thing to do. I mean, putting on, like, you know, from describing how loud the music was in the club and then you making a joke that I don't think it's in the book. Like, I think you hurt your vocal cords just doing that I mean, you do a fantastic job, man. You really do.
I burst the blood vessel in my vocal cords. This is a true thing. I did it while recording the audiobook for it. Terrible, y'all. So understand, people like Justin and I, we tire.
You put your heart into it, man. You got to put your soul into it. You have to, because what you're essentially doing when you write a book like this, the whole purpose of Illogical is, and people got to read the book, but it's no different than what your dad was doing. You know, when he jumped on that, I don't know if it was a car or the platform or whatever it was, when he was getting his voice out. You are essentially, in many ways, delivering the word of God, if you will, through you, in not a religious way. And I think that's really, really cool. It's a very spiritual book. You always kind of go back to what you know. You go back to the Bible in some ways, but it's not a religious book. It's not like, hey, I'm a Christian and this is what you should do. It's like it's like rules to live by, and then you validate it by these beautiful stories that I find fascinating, from David and Goliath to Joseph and all of these types of things. And that, it makes it like, it almost like cements it home. And I think that's really, really powerful, because people are really afraid to do that today. And I love that you now have done it multiple times. I mean, you weren't afraid to do what you did before, but it's also very scary to be in the public spotlight, to have a large following, and also to, like, quote biblical verses.
Well, you and I have talked about this, man, at length, of just like leaning into our fears, if you will, leaning
Yeah.
into our vulnerabilities. I realize that my life has been changed by living illogically.
Yeah.
My life has been drastically improved by just saying yes, if you will, to saying yes to taking off the limits, by doubting my doubts, bro. We all have doubts. We
Oh, yeah.
all have doubts. But I learned, man, to doubt my doubts, to question the things that I doubt. It's not so much making fear be absent, but just realizing, you know what, my faith, my courage is going to be stronger than my fear. Because, bro, like, again, I've had no more real moment than my conversation with you on your podcast, on Man Enough, when it maybe 6 months
real.
ago.
That got
It
real.
had no realer moment than on that podcast. But Illogical, I was just like, I have to rid myself of this fear because the reader will benefit so greatly. And if I leave the earth with nothing else, I would want to leave the earth with this manuscript.
Well, I will tell you, for anybody watching, just some brief backstory. As I said, I first reached out to Emmanuel after I saw Uncomfortable Conversations, just to support. I didn't want anything. There was nothing I wanted. I didn't need anything from you. At first, I was just like, you are amazing. And I, of course, we were launching our podcast, and I'm like, what a great guest you would be. But we stayed in touch. I got your book. I made sure all my followers knew about it, read your book. And then when you came on the podcast, what was so interesting was in that moment, you weren't what I expected, because you had a little bit of armor on, right? And over the course, and I hope you all go back and listen to this podcast, over the course of that hour, the armor came off eventually, and you at the end were feeling, as you said, like not enough, like you felt uncomfortable, as you will. And I afterwards, because you and I we don't know each other that well. I'm excited to get to know you more. We've had a couple of interactions afterwards, and I really look forward to having you in my life as a friend. But I remember being afraid that you were going to be like a lot of the other celebrities, if you will, where I would get a call from the publicist who was like, you know what? I don't know if we should release this episode, or I want approval, or let's edit. And come to find out that the opposite happened. You left that, and the publicist emailed saying how amazing of a conversation you thought it was and how excited you were for the world to hear it. To me, that was my first actual taste behind the scenes of how you are illogical. Because that would be the illogical thing, to be like, oh, I got really vulnerable there. Or like, oh, they broke me down a little bit, or I got uncomfortable. I don't want anyone to see that. That's logical. That's normal. You went the other way, as to say, like, you really got me thinking after this episode. And I knew in that moment that there was no facade, that this is really your life's work, that this is your purpose. You didn't hold back, and you could have, brother. And I tell you that because I've seen it from other people. You could have, and you said, no, I'm here. This is me. I went on a journey. I came out the other side. I want people to see that journey. I'm not holding anything back. And look what happened. That episode's now nominated for a Webby, right? And this is what I mean. And so you are truly, you're not just one of these like influencers who provide lip service. And I tell you this as a brother, I'm seeing this firsthand. You are walking the walk, and I appreciate that, which is why I was so happy to jump on here with you to support this book, which is a beautiful book that I really believe that everybody needs.
Man, well, one, thank you. And two, I think the lesson I've learned, and the lesson here is, the world benefits when you're your most authentic self.
Mm-hmm.
Now, that's not easy to do.
No.
But it's in our lowest moments that we can propel ourselves forward. It's in our most bare moments that we find out who we truly are. My most like terrifying story, yet maybe my favorite story to tell in the book and in my life, It comes in the chapter, Justin. I might be crazy. I think I shared.
I was about to ask you about that. I love it. I was like, I was listening to that, and I was like, yes, go. That's what I'm talking about. Tell the story. Please tell the story for everybody who hasn't heard it yet.
It comes at the lowest point of my occupational career. I am playing for the Philadelphia Eagles, and I'm trying to brown nose, as we all do at times, trying to get a raise. I'm trying to make the team. I go into the coach's office, and the coach has a depth chart on the wall. Now, I go into the coach's office to watch film from practice earlier that day. I'm sitting there trying to, hey, coach, what could I have done better? I don't really care what I could have done better.
No, you just want to make the team.
That's it. I just want to make the team. Coach, what could I have done better? But while sitting there talking to coach, I look at the depth chart. Now, for those watching who don't realize, a depth chart just tells you where on the team do you rank at the time. We were in April at the time. This was the off season. The NFL season does not start until September. So there's a lot of roster shuffling. You can move up, you can move down. Justin, true story. As I look at the depth chart, I look under my positional grouping, linebackers. I don't see my name. I scoured from top to bottom again. Emmanuel Acho, I don't see my name. I'm like, you know what, Justin? Surely they just misplaced me. So I check tight ends. Don't see my name. I check another position grouping, running backs, don't see my name. Justin, as God is my witness, this is a true story. I'm sitting next to the coach. The tape is still running. I am paying him no mind. I'm just scouring the depth chart, top to bottom, every single position group on the football field. I don't see my name. Then I look at the very bottom. Under the depth charts, I see the words in big block letters, cut. In the NFL, cut means you're getting fired.
Yeah.
My name is amongst 4 names. One name had already been fired earlier that day, and my name is amongst the other 3. I instantly run to the bathroom. I get on hands and knees. I start praying. It's like tears are like, whoa, starting to build in my eyes. I'm in the bathroom of the coaches and owners level. The owner, $1 billion Jeffrey Lurie, and the coaches. And I'm on hands and knees in a stall, Justin.
It's probably the cleanest bathroom you could have been in that whole facility.
Right? But that was a moment, dude, where I was like, I might be crazy. And I titled a chapter, I Might Be Crazy, because during our illogical journeys, we're always going to have that moment where you're like, I might be crazy, but might is the operative word. Because I'm like, you might be crazy, but you're perfectly illogical. Because in that moment, I had to believe the unbelievable because I couldn't believe my eyes. My eyes said I was going to be cut, but I was like, I refuse to believe that. Obviously, I end up making the team months later. I bring that up because when I was talking to you some months ago, I was like, yo, what the heck is on? I truly left that conversation. I've never felt more uneasy in the last 18 months. But there's a beauty in feeling uneasy. There's a beauty in being illogical. There's a beauty in going against conventional wisdom. Conventional wisdom is leaving a conversation where I'm fully vulnerable, calling Justin, being like, hey, don't air that. Conventional wisdom is staying in the National Football League at 25 years old, but I decide to move on. Conventional wisdom is staying in that relationship because you know he's going to propose to you and all of your friends are in a relationship, so maybe you should just move on in that further step of life. Conventional wisdom is staying in that city that your parents have never left and your friends have never left. Conventional wisdom is staying at that job even though you have a calling to go start that entrepreneurial business. Being illogical is going against conventional wisdom, but you're going to have a crazy moment in there, man.
I remember saying this to you before. I just want to bottle your self-confidence and sell it. and what I find interesting is that's what you're doing with this book is you're giving people that path to actually believe in themselves. And I love how you break it down. One of the things that really struck me, and I'm sure you're going to get a lot of feedback, is this idea of goals.
Ooh.
Right? Because it's illogical, this idea that like, oh, well, you have to set goals, right? People post their goals on their bathroom mirrors as you know, you did, you woke up to it every single day, right? You write about that in the book. Can Can you break that down a bit for people who obviously haven't read the book yet, but just this whole idea of how goals can also hurt you in some ways. Goals don't work.
I fervently believe that goals are dumb. Chapter 11, called Goals Are Dumb. I hate goals. I hate goal setting. I'm done with it. After my junior year in college, I wanted to go to the National Football League. Who wouldn't? After 3 years, you can move on to the National Football League. So I submit my resume, if you will, my game tape to the NFL. They review it and they write me back a letter. Emmanuel, you will not be drafted in rounds 1 through 3. Me? Not drafted in rounds 1 through 3? You kidding me? I'm the big man playing football at Texas. I was Mr. Texas coming out of high school. What do you mean? So, true story, Justin, I highlight that. Emmanuel, you won't be drafted in rounds 1 through 3. I put it above my bed. Every morning I woke up during my senior year because I decided to come back to college. I looked at it. Every night I went to sleep before I went to bed. I looked at it. Because you know what they say about goals. Look at them, visualize them, commit them to memory. I worked tirelessly to chase the goal of being drafted in rounds 1 through 3. Well, I'm at the NFL Combine. It's February 2012. I'm running the 40-yard dash in front of 32 billionaires, $32 billion owners. Justin, as I'm running, I hear boom, 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 boom. I think my heels are clicking, so I keep running. Boom, boom, boom. Turns out my quad is being torn off the bone with every stride. I clutch at my right quad muscle as I fall to the ground. 2 months later, during the NFL draft, I got drafted in the 6th round. That day, I committed to stop setting goals because I didn't reach my goal, and it crushed my self-esteem. It damaged my self-efficacy. It truly ruined the thoughts of myself. I realized the goal is an easiest way to fail in life. So instead of setting goals, I just have an objective with no limitations. Because if you want to fail, set a goal. So now it's kind of like, well, what the heck is the difference? See, a goal by definition, Justin, is an end towards which energy is aimed. An objective is just simply energy aimed in a direction. Why would I want to start something with the end in mind? And when we set goals, that's what we're all doing. We're all putting a limit on our accomplishments. We're all saying, at best, this is what I can do, but what the heck if you could do better? Like, what if you could do better? And then here's the worst part. What if you don't do what you thought you could do? Justin, we all do this. At 26, man, I want to get married. At 28, I want to have kids. At 30, I want to have a house. But then what the heck happens when you're 31 and you ain't got none of it? Now you're looking at yourself like a failure. And I hated what it did for my life because I lived a year of my life lost, damaged, sad because of a failed goal.
I love that because you're breaking it down in such a unique way. And it is so counterintuitive and illogical. But it's so funny because I really related to the book because so much of my success has also come from being illogical. But I didn't know it until I read it. You know what I mean?
What's the most illogical thing you've done?
What's the most illogical thing I've done? It was funny after reading your book. I've realized there's nothing that I do that's logical. I live completely illogical in many ways. What would I say? I'd say I remember when I got on Jane the Virgin. The first thing I did was figure out how I was going to, because Hollywood had finally let me in as an actor, was figure out how I was going to use it to let me in as a filmmaker, because that was my actual goal. Like, that's what I wanted. That's what I felt like I was supposed to do, is help tell stories. And I remember when we got nominated for Golden Globe, I was sitting next to the people at CBS Films that owned and ran CBS Films. And I was like, I got a movie to pitch you. I didn't have the movie yet. And I wanted to build that relationship. And then shortly after, I had an idea based on a dear friend of mine, Claire Wineland, who was dying of cystic fibrosis. I didn't go in with a script. I didn't go in with a full pitch. I showed them the episode of the documentary that I had made about this young girl, and I said, I want to make a movie about two people who are going to fall in love, but they have to stay 6 feet apart. There was nothing else, and they basically greenlit the movie. And here I was, producing, directing, having no clue what I was doing. First year on Jane the Virgin. Had only been a documentary and music video director, and now I had to go figure out how to make a movie. And that movie went on to make $100 million around the world. Completely illogical, but I knew it and I followed it. I just didn't have a word for what I was doing until you wrote the book. So I appreciate that.
Here's what's interesting, bro. What I love about what you just said is you followed your convictions and you followed what it seems like your calling.
Yeah.
Right. Like you were led by your convictions. You were led by your calling. I say later on in Illogical that your calling is your calling. It's not a conference call.
I love that. Yeah.
What's so beautiful about your
didn't Brene Brown also repost that?
Yeah.
I was like, all right.
Your calling is your calling. It's not a conference call. What's beautiful about your story, my story, the story of those that are watching, or at least the story that will be told of those that are watching, sometimes you just got to follow your calling. Bro, you said you didn't have a script, like a full-fledged script, but you just knew a calling that was given to you was you needed to create this movie. Uncomfortable Conversations with a Black Man, true story. The calling was given to my life, and I told my team about it, and they were like, the market's too saturated for a book like this. I'm like, I don't care about market saturation. Like, I have to do this. I had an inner conviction. But then it dawned on me, like, you know what? I have to go anyway, because this is my calling. So they didn't hear what I heard. He didn't hear what I heard. She didn't hear what I heard. And to your point, I hire a wedding videographer, my best friend, an Olympic gold medalist. We sit in an all-white room, record an episode of Uncomfortable Conversations, which leads to 10 episodes, 90 million views, a couple Emmys later. And it's like, it's because I followed my calling and my conviction that not everybody else heard. And I love hearing your story because I hope it inspires those watching. Sometimes you just got to follow your calling, and it's not a conference call. So your mom, your dad, your best friend, your sister, your brother, your grandma, your aunt, they might not co-sign, and that's okay.
You might have to kick them off the call. You might have to kick them off the call. Like you talk about right before, I love this story in your book early on, right before you're about to shoot your first episode, your good friend, I believe, was it ESPN or another, texts you.
Yep.
Yeah, maybe you shouldn't do that. Like you said, like 4 or 5 minutes right before.
Dude.
And you had to figure out, how do I move forward? Can you tell that story?
12 minutes before episode 1 of Uncomfortable Conversations.
12 minutes. That's amazing.
I'll never forget.
Yeah.
Because I'm opening the door to the studio with my right hand and my phone vibrates in my left hand. And so I open the door and I check my phone, and it's a dear friend of mine at my old network. And she simply says, "Hey, Emmanuel, I don't like this idea you have for your show, Questions White People Have." See, it's interesting. What y'all haven't realized and I haven't told y'all is Uncomfortable Conversations with a Black Man wasn't the original title of my first book. It was actually Questions White People Have, because white people have questions. And so when she texted me with the old title, not yet realizing I had changed the title. That's how you know how authentic this story is. She texted me, "Hey, I don't like this concept, Questions White People Have. White people didn't help Black people assimilate into our culture and our understanding. Why do we need to help educate them as to how to navigate ours?" And I said, "Well, I just have to go as God leads. Let me know if you have any other ideas." See, that was my calling, not a conference call. I knew that my actions might be illogical to some, but I just had to continue to move forward. And the beauty of the movement, the beauty of your movement, the beauty of my movement, the beauty, hopefully, of the viewers' movement is when we're illogical, bro, we break the dam open for everyone. Mm-hmm. For everyone. Chapter 10 of Illogical.
4 Minute Mile.
Yes. Yeah. Chapter 10 of Illogical, I call it when the dam breaks, because the dam breaks open when you act in your calling, when you move in your purpose. Dude, so many people, and there's nothing more beautiful than when somebody comes up to me and says, Hey, Emmanuel, I've been holding uncomfortable conversations with a small group in Wichita, Kansas. I've been meeting with my workers for uncomfortable conversations. And I'm just like, the dam broke open. Justin just mentioned the 4-minute mile. For those that don't know that story, my favorite story of all time, Roger Bannister. 2,000 years, scientists said you can't run a mile in under 4 minutes. They thought it was physically impossible. The heart might explode. Roger Bannister was like, yeah, I don't believe that. Yeah. By May 6, 1952, Oxford, England, Roger Bannister runs a mile in under 4 minutes. Within the next 2 years, 10 people ran a mile in under 4 minutes. Why? Because they saw one man move in his purpose. They saw one man move illogically, and it led the rest of the running world to do so. Bro, you know, today the world record for the mile is down by 17 seconds, 3 minutes, 43 seconds now. 1,800 people have run a mile in under 4 minutes because one person chose to be illogical. And so that's the beauty of your story in creating a film, how many people were inspired. It's the beauty of my story, and that's hopefully the beauty of the viewer stories to come.
I love it. I've been so inspired going on this journey with you. One of the things that really struck me that helped me was when you give the analogy of the earmuffs, because we live in a world where people like to make a lot of noise. And for anybody watching this, I'm telling you firsthand, as someone who is in public, as a successful man, that listening and reading this book is actually impacting and helping me, and I guarantee it will impact and help you. So if you haven't yet, maybe consider buying the book for a friend. Now is a great time to do it. But if you have somebody in your life who you think needs a little bit of motivation, I highly suggest you gifting this book. This would be a good gift, and a gift that will come back to you, I assure you. But back to specifically this conversation around the noise, you know, I've struggled with separating myself from the way that people view me, from the people that just want to make loud noise and comments, from being attacked. And you go into detail not only about the earmuffs, but then also about how you can learn from some of that feedback, which I found really, really helpful. And I thought very brave of you, because it's very easy to write a book like this and be like, to omit the part out. And I'd love for you to tell the story, but omit the part out where you got some pushback, maybe. And, you know, as you talked about, a lot of negative feedback from maybe a tweet or something that you said on your show, specifically about the marijuana and the 100-meter runner. But you went into it, you put it in your own book, and then you talked about how you learned from it. And I found that fascinating and brave, and it speaks to your spirit. So if you don't mind, for our wonderful friends who have joined us tonight, break down the idea of the earmuffs, and then the choosing of to let some of the stuff in, because there's stuff that we can learn from the negative feedback.
And there's really a lot you can learn if you're vulnerable. There's a lot you can learn if you're humble. And I learned so much from when I fall, not necessarily when I fail, but I recalibrated failing as falling. And as long as I get up, I win. So the concept is, over our journeys of being illogical, there's going to be a lot of naysayers. But you just got to make sure you put your earmuffs on and you block out the noise. But what I like about a recent gift I got, the Apple AirPod Pros, is they have a transparency function. So you can completely block out noise around you and hear nothing, or you can hit a small button, and with the transparency function, you can still let some noise in. I think at times we need to navigate our lives like we have those AirPod Pros in. Block out some of the naysayers, block out some of the criticism, but listen to the construction. Justin, what I learned recently, bro, about why salt water kills you, right? I learned about why salt water kills you. Randomly, I'll research things. And I learned that salt water kills you because of the density of salt. You die of dehydration before the water actually ever hydrates you or is of any good. And in life, we're so used to now giving out criticism without construction. And to me, criticism without construction is the same thing as salt water, bro. We think we're helping people, but we're killing them long before we add any positive value. Long before. So now we all have to be discerning about what's salt water and what's water. Recently, maybe 8 months ago now, the biggest freaking emotional damage of my life from social media.
Yeah, that's a big one.
Dude, I'm getting crushed because this runner, Sha'Carri Richardson, one of the fastest women in the world, she tested positive for smoking marijuana. And so she was not allowed to run at the Olympic Games in Tokyo. And everybody was like, she should be able to run. She should be able to run. I comment, being under the influence of marijuana is cool if you're running in 100 meters, but what if you're throwing the javelin? What if you're throwing the shot put? I didn't think anything of it. I was genuinely, in all sincerity, track's my first love. If 100-meter runner's under the influence of marijuana, that's one thing. But like, if you have sharp objects in your hand or heavy weights, that's dangerous. Well, social media did not find that one too amusing. Now, full transparency, I've never smoked in my life. So I'm speaking from a place of naivety as it pertains to the influences of smoking weed, if you will. So I'm getting crushed. I mean, I'm trending on social media, getting crushed. I'm logging off. I'm sitting here like, dude, am I just a freaking idiot? People who I love and look up to are killing me. Jaleel White, the dude who plays Steve Urkel, he's crushing me. I'm like, I'm getting crushed by Urkel. This is terrible. This is a true story, dude. I can laugh at my face now. Yeah. In the midst of getting crushed, I see a Dr. Benicia Williams. She messages me and she says, look up Harry and Anslinger. In the midst of all the noise, Acho, you're an idiot. Acho, you're an idiot. Acho, you're dumb. Why do they give you a microphone? I see, look up Harry Anslinger. So that message stuck out. I turned on the transparency function of my headphones and I looked up Harry Anslinger. Harry Anslinger was the first head of the Federal Bureau of Narcotics in 1934, I believe. Look him up. And Harry Anslinger went on to push to have marijuana outlawed by creating the Gore Files. The Gore Files were 200 of the most heinous crimes committed in the 1930s. And Harry Anslinger would take these police reports of the most heinous crimes. Emmanuel Acho took an axe and murdered his entire family. And Harry Anslinger would add at the end of these police reports, because he was under the influence of marijuana. So, Harry Anslinger fabricated 200 stories. 198 were true stories, but he added marijuana usage. 2 of the stories they never even found to be true. He fabricated 200 stories called the Gore Files, and he submitted that to the Supreme Court, and that is how the 1937 Marijuana Tax Act got passed.
And nobody fact-checked.
Nobody fact-checked. So, all that to say, in the midst of my greatest social media catastrophe, I was willing to take off my earmuffs and listen and learn and then speak and educate. Next thing you know, I'm getting offered like multi-thousand-dollar engagements to speak about marijuana. I'm like, you know what? Too far. I'm not there yet.
So what did you do in that moment? So you learn about it, and then what's the illogical thing to then do? So what did you do once you learned?
Dude, once I learned about it, I decided to speak about it. Right? Like most people would have just hidden, would have just put their fists up in the midst of this social media war. But I said, you know what? I'm not going to put my fists up. I'm going to put my fists down. I'm going to listen. And now that I've educated myself, now I was going to speak. Now, I was championing education about marijuana. Yeah. It's not my space to say whether it should be legalized federally or outlawed. No. But at least let me now be a champion for the advocacy of education around it. I don't know anything about THC to CBD to X, Y, and Z. But I knew in that moment, bro, let me learn and then champion something that I have no familiarity with. And I think that is too a part of being illogical. It's stepping into spaces that you may have no familiarity with, educating your spaces and moving boldly in said spaces.
I just love that you shared that story. I think that was really bold and brave of you, because all of us are faced with moments where it feels like the world is crashing down on us, where it feels like we are underwater, right? We've drinking too much of the salt water and we're drowning internally, and we don't know which way is up. And I love that in that moment, your life raft was, okay, let me take the earmuffs off and listen. And in that, you saw something, and then that actually got you out. That pulled you out. Whereas so often we can just keep the blinders on and the earmuffs on and just be stuck to our ways and start to feel bad about ourselves, and maybe we're this and maybe we're that. But I think this is really, really good advice for especially young people, because what we are, our world, you and I, Emmanuel, it's no different than anybody else's. There's just a lot more people that are paying attention. The feelings are the same. And I needed that. I needed that story, because I can so often fixate on the negative. I can get 1,000 positive things and then the one negative, and I'm like, oh, maybe they're right. And I feel like it's been a little bit of a balm to my heart to read and listen to your words. Is there one thing that the folks that are here with us can do every single day to maybe be a little more logical?
I love that question. The most dangerous phrase somebody can ever utter is, "That's the way it's always been done." So what's the one thing you can do is stop yourself from ever uttering that phrase and go against the way it's always been done, even in the small things. On my daily sports show, sometimes we'll do rankings of a top 5 list of your favorite basketball players at the time. We always rank 5 to 1. But I was just randomly like, you know what? Why don't we go like 4, 5, 2, 3? Like, why don't we just kind of go out of order, spice it up for the viewer? Now, this is as unimportant as a ranking on a sports show. But I challenge you daily to challenge yourself as to, wait, why am I doing this like that with my family? Why am I teaching myself this practice? Why am I raising my kids in that manner? Why am I occupying the space at my work like that? Because the biggest premise of being illogical is believing it is so, even when it's not so that it can be so. That's illogical. People say, what is it to be illogical? I also say, believe it is so when it's not so that it can be so. So what can you do on a daily basis? Challenge yourself from ever going or thinking that's the way it's always been done. Because if you think that's the way it's always been done, then you'll only do what's already been done.
I love that. It reminds me of this story. A dear friend of mine, Oscar, he told us this story about how he grew up, and every Thanksgiving they had ham, but they cut the ham in half always. And this was grandma's secret recipe. So he grew up, they had a huge house, amazing family, Black family, and grandma ran Thanksgiving. So every year, Thanksgiving, they get the ham, they cut it in half, they cook one side and then another side. Just the way they did it. It was juicier. It was they had all the stories. And then one day, one of Oscar's sisters asks grandma, like, hey, what's the secret to the ham? Is it the cutting in the half? Could you know why? And grandma said, no, it's just the way that we always did it. And they said, why? They're like, well, because the oven was too small. And I'm like, wait, so you're telling me we still cut the ham in half, even though we have a big oven? And they were following a tradition that they didn't even know existed, simply because 50 years ago, the oven was too small for the whole ham. But it took somebody asking the question. And I always think about that in my own life. Like, where in my life am I being logical just because somebody said it wasn't so? Because somebody put their 4-minute barrier on me. And this book really challenges us to break free of all of that.
That's it, dude. I love that story. I will be retelling that story because I say we live in boxes that other people set up for us. And it's the wildest thing to me. Kind of a story I love. and I love we're sharing stories. I was in Paris this summer at the Louvre Museum. And while going to the Louvre Museum, there's art everywhere. Ceiling, floor, left, right, art. So I was baffled when I saw a line in the Louvre Museum. Because I'm like, what y'all waiting to see? It's art everywhere. And I turn the corner and I see the Mona Lisa, and everybody's in line to see it. I'm like, yo, that's cool, but like, it's just a painting. It dawned on me that day, though, if the Mona Lisa were to be sold at a garage sale, it might go for $20, maybe. And not because it's not a great painting, but because it depicts a pale-skinned woman, big forehead, small lips, dark hair. That was beauty back then, based upon the construct of beauty in the 14 to 1700 Renaissance era. Now there's a different construct of beauty that we all try to fit in. Sun-kissed skin, small waist, big bust, etc. But why are we letting such insignificant people have significance in our lives? So when you talk about living inside of a box, we all live inside some box that somebody else set for us. Yeah. And I just want to walk outside of the box.
I love it. And we need to. I love that. And I love that you tied that back in your book. I think it was in the intro in chapter 1, but you tie it, you did it so beautifully with beauty standards, just as you shared now. And it really gets you thinking, like, am I attracted to something because I'm attracted to it? Or is it because they told me that I should be attracted to it? And it sounds crazy, but I just got back. I was getting stem cell, and I'll talk to you offline about this because I know you're an athlete, but I was getting stem cell in Colombia. And I was walking around and I was noticing that a lot of the women under a certain age had identical physiques. And it's exactly what you describe in your book, right? It's one of the plastic surgery capitals of the world with Brazil. And I'm like, wow, if we go back 100 years, would that have been beauty? What's it going to be like 100 years from now? And it just goes to show, like, we are all, I hate to say it, but we're, in many ways, we can be very much like sheep just following a leader that we don't know who the leader actually is. We don't know where these things come from. So the only way to truly break free is in many ways to, as you say in the book, to make the illogical choice. Because then you can break free, right? Then you can take the pill. Then you can be like Neo in the Matrix, which I know is also one of your favorite movies, mine as well. We'll talk about the last one offline. But I love it. Okay, I know we got about 10 minutes left, so I want to get to some audience questions. But before I do, okay, is there anything? I know you're on a book tour, so you get asked a lot of questions. What have you not been asked that you want to talk about yet? I love that question for myself because I always get asked the same question. So, what have you not been asked, or even more so, like, okay, when I wrote my first book, I was like, oh man, I wish I would have finished it now because I just learned something that I wanted to put in. Where are you at with that? So what have you not talked about yet? And what have you maybe learned that you wish you could have put in the book that obviously you can't now, but you can put in your next one?
I'm glad you said that. So I had that moment, but thankfully I had that moment with enough time to add it. What's interesting,
I didn't.
Book was written, bro, and book was written. It's done. You know how it is. Yeah. And I reached out to my book agent like, yo, is there time to make an edit? And the edit was what was a little bit of what I just shared is y'all realize that we all live on somebody else's scale, somebody else's measurement system. And I'll share quickly, probably the thing I don't share most often, but my favorite thing, Michael Jordan, LeBron James, they're in the debate for the two greatest basketball players of all time.
Yeah.
The biggest argument for Michael Jordan, 6 times was he a champion in the National Basketball Association. The biggest point of condemnation for LeBron James, he went to the NBA championship 10 times, but he only won 4, meaning he lost 6. However, the same sport in a different metric system, but the same finishing of second place for LeBron James 6 times and first place for LeBron James 4 times. Remember, LeBron went 10 times, he won 4. Yeah. LeBron would be greater at the Olympic scale because LeBron would have 4 gold medals and 6 silver medals. Michael Jordan would only have 6 gold medals. So it dawned on me later on after I finished writing the book, we think Michael Jordan is better, but that's based upon our metric system of the National Basketball Association. The metric system of the Olympic scale, LeBron James is better. So greatness literally is only dependent upon whose scale you're measuring. So let no one else provide the scale for your measurement. You provide the scale for your own measurement. And I think that would be the crux of a message I'd want to share.
Mm. And also, two people can view them both as great,
Yeah.
right? Everybody's got their own scale. It's when we, as you say, it's when I attach myself to your scale that I lose.
Bingo. Bingo.
All right. We have some amazing audience questions. Okay. This audience member asks, I feel many young African-American boys have unrealistic, aspirational expectations about what they would like to be when they grow up. Many want to be professional athletes or actors or musicians. So as a former NFL player, what are your thoughts about this? And how do I inspire my son? This is from a mother. How do I inspire my son to be more realistic about his future expectations? Or a father. I could be either. Sorry. Gender that.
I would say it's two things. I would say, one, don't undermine the reality of the expectations, right? I am a first-generation American, and football to me growing up was a black and white object you kick with your feet. It was soccer. My parents are born and raised in Nigeria. I went to an all-boys private school. I graduated with 75 people. There was no reason I should have made it to the National Football League, but I did. So let's not limit the reality of or the trajectory of our children's future. But I will also say this. You often have to see something to be something. The reason I wanted to play in football was because I saw Emmitt Smith, Hall of Fame running back for the Cowboys. So make sure that we are exposing our children to opportunities. I didn't want to be an accountant. I didn't meet accountants growing up. None that looked like me. I didn't want to be an author truly growing up because I didn't see a bunch of authors that looked like me. But let me tell you this, and we can move on from this question. I remember reading a book in 6th grade, humanitarian class, by an author named Chinua Achebe. It was called Things Fall Apart. And Chinua Achebe was a Nigerian. And I remember in 6th grade, wait, he's like me. And I still remember that name and the name of that book roughly 24 years later or so, because he reminded myself of me. Yeah. So make sure we are exposing our children to all opportunities and possibilities to see what's possible.
I love that. And it's especially true for Black boys and teachers, because there are so few Black male teachers teaching young Black boys, so they don't know that you can grow up to be a teacher. Yeah. And they've shown that when Black boys have Black male teachers, they are far more likely to go to college, graduate high school, and actually go into that same field. So I love that. Audience member 2, who were your mentors? What is the most important thing you've learned from your mentors?
Mentors. My older brother played 10 years in the National Football League. And what's so truthfully for me is I believe that more is caught than is taught. You see something more than you hear something. You can receive a message by seeing more easily than you can receive a message by hearing, so to speak. And Oprah, I would consider her a mentor at this point in time. Now, more distant. We don't talk as often as I talk to my brother. I think one of the most valuable lessons, and it's as applicable as it can be, after uncomfortable conversation with a Black man, she called me and she said, don't make a living having conversations with famous people, because eventually you'll run out of famous people.
Wow. There you go. From the woman who's interviewed more famous people than anybody.
And episode 2 of Uncomfortable, Matthew McConaughey. 3 of Uncomfortable Conversations, Chip and Joanna Gaines. She called me after episode 3. Episode 4 I did by myself, and episode 4 I did by myself. Episode 5 I did with a regular, non-famous family, if you will, from Austin, Texas, a biological white son, 2 adopted Black children. I learned that day, like, we all have a unique story to tell, a beautiful story to tell. Find the beauty in every story.
I love that. I love that you got Oprah on speed dial too, probably. That's pretty cool. And I also love the story in your book where you share the blocked call, the no caller ID story, and how that triggered you from past trauma, because that was how you got cut. Yes. And now here it is. It's all coming in. So you got to pick up the phone. Yes. For me, that was just basically saying, do not let your trauma dictate your future. Don't let your past dictate your future. Mm-hmm. All right. Audience member number 3 asks, I feel social media has made it difficult to have dialogues about challenging issues impacting all of us. Persons and issues on the extreme side of issues seem to get noticed the most. Any suggestions on how to improve the dialogue and still use social media?
3-fold: truth, love, grace. That's the way to speak. Speak with truth. But the problem with speaking with truth without grace is it's so sharp that it can cut. If I walk out the house and Justin sees me, hey, Acho, your outfit's terrible. He was honest, but it was a little too truthful. I didn't receive it well. If you only speak with grace without truth, it's like superfluous, meaningless nothings. But at the end of the day, all love always has to be present because no one cares what you know until they know that you care. So how can you still engage in this meaningful dialogue, even on toxic social media? Truth, grace, love.
I love that. I love that. Can I add something to that? Because I just thought of a quote. We're of different faiths, but I believe they all come from the same tree. But something that always struck me was this quote from Baha'u'llah, who says, "Not everything that a man thinketh can be disclosed. Not everything that a man discloseth can be considered timely, and not every timely utterance can be suited to the capacity of one who hears it." So basically, it's like a three-prong approach, where it's like, you don't have to say everything you're thinking. And if you are thinking it, maybe you should look at the person you're saying it to and see if they have the capacity to actually hear it.
Yo,
Okay.
text me that when we get offline, dude. I need that.
Oh man, it's helped me so much, because you think sometimes you got to say something, and there's times where it's like, oh wait, I can think it. I don't actually have to say it, right? And if I say it, maybe now's not the right time. And if it is the right time, let me have my third check. Can Emmanuel hear it?
Yeah.
Right? Because so often we just go through life, and especially now, like as this person said, the more extreme we are, the more likes or comments and follows we get. Which I also love that you talk about that in your book too. But we got to save something for the book for people to. All right. Okay. This is a great question. Audience member 4, what do you think is the best way to understand people we disagree with?
Ooh.
That's a good question.
I think you have to listen to their intention. Now, their intention and their action may not always align, but I think you have to listen to their intention. First thing Oprah said when she called me the very first time, Emmanuel, what is your intention? Because somebody's intention might be good, even though it's very poorly executed. So how can we manage people we don't disagree with? Always monitor, like, at least let me try to hear your heart and hear what's your intention.
And now you have to tell us what you said when Oprah called you.
What
was your intention?
I said, Oprah, my intention is to change the world, and I truly believe I can. I'm currently working on writing a book. And she said, books? I love books. And if you look at the side of Illogical, you'll see an Oprah book. And the last I checked, I am the only author not named Oprah to write multiple Oprah books under the imprint.
Wow. That's amazing. She gave me a hug once. She won't remember, but I got an Oprah hug at the Golden Globes at one of the ceremonies we were at for. Oh my God, that was a great day. That was a great day. It was like I felt like Olaf. I like warm hugs. Okay, do we have time? Do we have time for another one?
Yeah, we should have one more.
Okay. All right, I'm going to pick from all of these. Okay, here you go. We've heard the comments like stay in your lane or just stick to dribbling when athletes get involved as advocates in social issues. Do athletes and celebrities have a responsibility to use their notoriety and platforms in such ways? What's your best response to people critical of athletes for doing so?
I think to whom much is given, much is required. I think that athletes have a responsibility to educate themselves if they are going to speak. You don't necessarily have a responsibility to speak, but if you are going to speak, make sure it's educated. Here's what's interesting. Several athletes are professional athletes. They're not professional public speakers. They're not professional activists. They're not professional policymakers. They're professional athletes. So if you're going to speak on a topic, at least make sure you have accrued enough intelligence about the topic to speak on it. I don't think athletes have a responsibility to speak, but you do have a responsibility to speak in an educated manner on a topic you're going to speak about. Too often we say, athletes, speak on this. They don't know what they're speaking about. They're not professional public speakers. They're professional athletes. So we have to understand also who we are praising and why we are praising them. Praise LeBron James for being one of the greatest basketball players of all time. But if you're looking for a beacon of light as it pertains to anything else, just cross-check if you should or not. And I love LeBron James. But too often we're like, man, I don't love LeBron James' opinion on this. That's fine. He's not even he's not professionally educated in that. You know, like, well, he's a bad role model. Then he shouldn't be a role model. I'm just talking about so many different people. So that's really my stance on it all.
Yeah, it's like we throw everything good out for the one bad.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's not a way to live. I love that, man. By the way, this question got me thinking about Craig Hodges. And we're making a documentary about Craig Hodges. I got to talk to you about who was a member of Jordan's Bulls, early 90s, blackballed, kicked out of the NBA for having an opinion before the NBA was ready, kind of like one of the first Kaepernicks. This has been an amazing conversation. And I really hope if you are watching this that you pick up this book for somebody that you love. I hope if you haven't read it yet, you dive into it. And it's the kind of book, it's the kind of book you're going to want to go back and read chapters again, because you are going to need the advice that Emmanuel gives over the course of your life. And luckily, I'm sure he's got 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 more books up his sleeve. Literally the opposite of me, who's like, this is too much stress. I can't do it. He's got a lot to say, and I can't wait to be a recipient of all that knowledge. I want one funny story. So I have your book here, right? But I can't show it. I didn't show it because it's wrapped in my book covering it. And let me just tell you why. It's funny. So I have a middle grade book coming out, kind of like you did, in October, and the publisher sent me the cover. And because I was going out of town and they needed me to post, and they sent me the book that they sent me it didn't fit. It was like it didn't have the right cover. So I go through 200 books in my bookcase. And luckily, you had sent me your book. The only book that it fit was Illogical. So literally, you saved my book launch because I didn't have it was the exact same size. Illogical was the exact same size as my book. And so literally, like, inside is your book that I'm reading, but it looks like my book. You saved the day. And I think it's a metaphor for our friendship and our relationship. And I just was laughing my ass off. I was like, of course, there was a FedEx package with your book, a FedEx package from HarperCollins. Nothing on the bookshelf fit, but Illogical fit, and that's Illogical. So thank you for saving the day.
Now that's how you end a conversation, my brother. Man, I appreciate you.
Oh, so awesome! Thank you for writing this book for all of us, man, and thank you for being Illogical. And for never giving up, and for knowing that what you had to offer, what God put in you, was meant to water a lot of other seeds. And may those turn into trees, and may your impact last for generations and generations.
Thank you, brother.
All right. Thank you all for listening. So appreciate you being here.
Thank you, Justin, and thank you, Emmanuel. Again, a reminder, Emmanuel Acho's book is Illogical, Saying Yes to a Life Without Limits. And a book with a signed book plate can be purchased in the link below or in the comments section. As we like to say around here, please go on gently.